Hello, everybody. It is Bryan Strawser, chairman of the Minnesota Gun Owners Caucus, and this is our recap of the 2024 legislative session. In a moment, I'm going to turn you over to Rob Doar, our senior vice president of government relations and the man that was at the Capitol every day. Rob's going to take you through an overview of what happened down at the Capitol from beginning to end. But before I turn it over to him in this video, I want to set the stage for what happened, what led us into 2024. As we began the legislative session, we were in year 2 of a DFL trifecta. We have a DFL governor in Tim Walz, formerly an A-rated, NRA-endorsed pro-gun congressman from southern Minnesota, who adopted as part of his platform every anti-gun piece of legislation that you can imagine. You want to ban high-capacity magazines or assault weapons, Tim Walz is your guy, and he'll sign that bill. In the Minnesota House, a progressive majority that was elected on promises of gun control, and last year could only deliver universal background checks and a watered-down red flag gun confiscation bill. In the Minnesota Senate, the DFL controls that chamber going into session by just one vote. And during session, of course, we saw Woodbury Senator Nicole Mitchell arrested for burglary in the first degree, but the DFL refusing to eject her from the Senate and she refusing to resign. And of course, she winds up becoming the deciding vote on critical gun control and other public safety legislation. So that's the hand we were dealt going from 2023 into 2024. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Rob and have him describe the legislative session. Over to you, Rob.
Thanks, Bryan. Hey, everybody. Rob Doar, Vice President of the Minnesota Gun Owners Caucus. And I want to thank you guys. After Election Day in 2022, when we saw complete Democrat control of government with anti-gun legislators and an anti-gun governor at the head of key committee seats and the head of legislative chambers, we were preparing for the worst, and you guys have got us through these past 2 years. Of course, last year we saw a whole slew of things introduced, assault weapons bans, magazine limits, mandatory reporting of lost or stolen firearms. We saw mandatory licensing, insurance, a registry of gun owners, all of those things that we stopped. Now, they did manage to get through last year, as you guys recall, a watered-down version of the universal background check bill and a watered-down version of red flag firearm confiscation, and we are keeping an eye on those as well for any avenues for potential litigation. But compared to what we expected, what we got was fantastic, and we really have you guys to thank for that. So as I said, all of those bills were introduced last year, and that typically happens. They do carry over into the next year of the biennium, so we're on year 2 of the biennium. But now all of these bills are officially dead, gone, buried. They don't carry anymore. We start over with a new legislature next January. Of course, we have elections coming up, and I'll touch on that in just a second. But I do want to recap some of the things some of the successes that we did have this year. A few things that we saw committee hearings on last year. We saw a committee hearing on the safe storage of firearms. So they call it safe storage, but it was essentially last year. It was you had to store your firearms and ammunition separately, and they had a whole slew of exceptions, including if you had a carry permit. Then you were allowed to have a loaded firearm in the home for self-defense. They completely gutted that bill, reintroduced it this legislative session. Much more measured approach, clearly with some input from law enforcement. At the end of the day, we were successful in weakening that bill to the point where they lost all their resolve, just by testifying in committees, by pointing out all of the errors, issues were in the bill. The author went through and pointed to our issues and said, hey, we fixed some of these things. We were, of course, opposed to the safe storage bill from day one and maintained our opposition throughout the entire legislative session, testified against it at each hearing. We even got our Sheriff's Association, the Minnesota Sheriff's Association, on board in the final days of session to oppose that bill. So you guys made thousands and thousands of contacts on that bill, and that bill, at the end of the day, didn't make it forward. Another bill that we saw was the mandatory reporting of lost and stolen firearms. That had a hearing last year, and they re-brought it forward. It did pass off of the House floor, as did the unsafe storage bill. They passed within a couple days of each other. And that bill, too, did not make it over the finish line. So no longer are you at risk of being criminalized for failing to report your firearms lost or stolen. That's not a risk you have to face anymore, just based on some arbitrary timeline that the government puts forward. Now, you guys, you law-abiding gun owners, when your guns are lost or stolen, you absolutely report them lost or stolen, because one, you want your guns back if they do get found. Two, you probably want to make an insurance claim if it's a particularly valuable firearm. But three, and most importantly, you don't want to be blamed for any crime that those guns are used for. So, that's just something that lawful gun owners do. So it's utterly unnecessary. We were glad that one made it by the wayside. Some other things that got a hearing in the House. We had a ban of carry in government centers. So in libraries, you guys remember that, libraries? They wanted to ban you from being able to carry and ban to have your right defense in a library, because you guys all know about all of the trouble lawful permit holders are causing in libraries. It's just been an epidemic, right? That one fell by the wayside as well. There are two things that were gaining steam in the final days of session. One, we didn't really have a position on. It was the increased penalties on people who are trafficking firearms to known prohibited people. We do think that it's important, if somebody is supplying firearms to prohibited people, that they be held accountable for the damage that they cause. We didn't have a position on the bill itself, but attached to that, what they slid right into that bill, which was a Republican-supported measure, was a ban on binary triggers. And those of you who don't know, a binary trigger is a firearm that when you pull the trigger once, it fires, and when you release it, it fires again. Now, we testified in opposition to this bill on numerous grounds, but first off, the initial language of it was so terrible. And you guys probably heard us, and we've gotten some questions about this, about does it apply to Glock firearms? And initially, it could have. That would have been at the discretion of the prosecutor, and depending on where you are, your prosecutor, your mileage may vary. But that it would have included a Glock firearm, because, as you guys know, a Glock firearm resets before the trigger is fully released. Now, they did clean up that language to make it very clear and explicit that it's a firearm that fires one round when you pull a trigger and another when you release it. We are interested in pursuing potential litigation. There's a few reasons for this. If you guys remember how that bill passed, it was the final hours of session, literally the final 90 minutes of session. They hadn't been able to pass this bill yet. It went through the Senate. The House passed it. It went through the Senate, had some amendments, so then it had to be repassed by the House. And they were running out of time, so they combined it all into a 1,500-page omnibus bill that nobody got to read because the reviser's website was down at the time. A 1,500-page omnibus bill. And it got slammed all together, and they just crammed it all through. For those of you who aren't aware, that the Minnesota Constitution requires that bills be single subject, and it says in order for it to be single subject, the subject of the bill has to be expressed in the title. The title of this bill is 6 pages long. But beyond that, there's also a requirement under the Minnesota Constitution that the bills have a single connecting thread. This was a tax bill. The binary trigger provision of the bill has no taxing, it has no spending, it has no cost. So if there's not a common thread between the subjects of the bill, that also makes it vulnerable to attack. So that's one potential issue. The second potential issue is a violation of the takings clause. Here it is a regulatory taking. The government is seeking to deny you your property, to make your property worthless and subject to seizure, surrender, or destruction, even though it was perfectly lawful. They just, by a stroke of the pen, have essentially seized all of your property. That's a violation of the takings clause under the Fifth Amendment. And then we also have a general Bruin challenge. This litigating this would be extremely expensive, and you guys know we're extremely careful stewards of the money that you send us, and we take extreme care to make sure that that your donations are well spent, and we need to make sure that if we do go through that expense, that we've got a very strong path to winning the case. So, we are looking at that. If you do own a binary trigger, preferably something that you bought off the shelf, if you bought it from Franklin Armory, for example, or something like that, where it came pre-installed with a binary trigger, do reach out to us. That would give us the strongest avenue for a case. We'd be interested in talking to you about that. So if you own one, or if you know somebody, please do get in touch with us at contact@gunowners.mn. We're very interested in pursuing that, but first we need somebody with strong standing. So we can discuss more about that if that is you, or if you know anybody. So at the end of the day, that was the singular gun control item that they were able to get past this legislative session, was that binary trigger ban. What's next? So right now, every seat in the Minnesota House is up for election. They are campaigning right now. November, they will go to election. Tim Walz will still be governor. Every senator will still be senator. There is a special election. Well, I guess it wouldn't be a special election. There is a Senate seat that is officially up for grabs in the western suburbs area, as Senator Kelly Morrison has retired. That seat's probably not a likely Republican pickup, but anything can happen. So we do have a chance there to flip the Senate. If the alleged DF felon, Senator Nicole Mitchell, resigns, that's a winnable seat in the Woodbury area. But she so far has stated that despite allegedly burglarizing, but not so allegedly if you just take her statements at face value, her stepmother's home, she has so far, despite calls from Democrats, leaders in her own party, the chair of the Democrat party, to resign, she has stated that she will be staying in office. So that seat, should she be either removed or resign, would be something that's up for grabs. So we have a chance for flipping the Senate. But right now, every seat in the Minnesota House is up for grabs. And we have the ability there through 134 seats, to flip control of the Minnesota House. And then we can stop being on defensive. We have the ability through our allies. You guys know we have strong relationships in both chambers. We, with our allies, would be able to put a stop to any of their agenda and actually put them on the defensive. Start sending pro-gun bills over to the Senate, so that the importance of this election cannot be understated for those of you who appreciate your Second Amendment rights. We're going to have, we did send out our grading and endorsement criteria questionnaires. So our endorsing committee will be reviewing all of those questionnaires and be issuing endorsements. For those of you who aren't aware, endorsements only last through the election cycle. So just because somebody was endorsed previously doesn't mean they're going to be endorsed again. We look at their grading for their votes. We evaluate their votes very carefully. We make sure that their votes are in line with their previous statements and their commitments, and we hold them accountable for their votes. We also look at statements that they may have made out in public, and evaluate those accordingly as well. So we have sent out those questionnaires. We will be extensively reviewing their voting records and their public statements, and things that they put out in their newsletters. We have all of those archived, and we go through those, and we make sure that they're upholding their word. So endorsements end the day that you're sworn into office, because now it's time to put up or shut up. So we will have brand new sparkling endorsements coming out as those questionnaires come back in, but find a way to get involved. You can make a donation to the Minnesota Gun Owners Political Action Committee. That's the mechanism by which we can directly support candidates and run ads supporting them or opposing their anti-gun oppositions, their anti-gun opponents. But yeah, get involved there. Find campaigns. Once our endorsement criteria comes out, find campaigns that you can get involved with. Maybe even if you have to drive 30 minutes or an hour, go do some door knocking. Offer your assistance. Maybe you're a graphic designer. Maybe you're a website guy. Maybe you can help them with their finance reporting. Find a way to help these candidates so that we no longer have to be on the defense next session. I would love to be strolling through the Capitol halls next legislative session, not having to scramble and worry about finding every vote and holding every Republican firm and making sure that we water things down to the point where they lose all their resolve. I mean, it's a tough job. It's much easier when we have our allies, when those bills come across from the Senate, that they could just say, nope, not going to happen. Now here's a bill for you. Here's constitutional carry. Here's stand your ground. So please do get involved this legislative cycle. It is incredibly important, and we'll be talking more to you about that. Thank you guys very much, and back to you, Bryan.
Thanks, Rob, for that recap. As you can see, everyone, we have a long road to travel between now and the 2025 legislative session. But we have some light at the end of this tunnel, with the entire Minnesota House having to stand for election in November of this year. So as Rob says, there's a great opportunity to get involved in a number of campaigns between now and then to flip some seats and hopefully put in a pro-Second Amendment legislature in the Minnesota House. And if we can do that, then we can stop the entire gun control agenda for 2025 and 2026. And then, of course, in November 2026, everything will be up for grabs. The Minnesota Senate, the governor's office, and the Minnesota House will be up for election again. There are a lot of ways that you can help support this effort. One way is simply by volunteering, by giving your time either to a candidate of your choice that is running for Minnesota House this fall, or volunteering with the Minnesota Gun Owners Caucus. You can do that at gunowners.mn/volunteer. Typical volunteer activities include attending events, passing out caucus literature, and if you're comfortable doing so, even speaking in public at various political events and sportsman, hunting and fishing events throughout the state. Another way that you can help the fight is to make a donation to the Minnesota Gun Owners Caucus. You can join us as a member for just $45 a year. That's about 11 cents a day, I think. But we offer other levels of membership as well, and you can do that at gunowners.mn/join. If you would rather simply donate, make a single donation, a one-time donation, you can do that to the main caucus, which is what we use for most of our political activities. You can donate to the Minnesota Gun Owners Support Fund, which is our tax-deductible 501c3, where we do education and, more importantly, we sue the government using money in the support fund. You can do that. We could also donate to our Political Action Fund, which is how we influence elections. You can do those at any time at gunowners.mn/donate. But finally, the best way that you can support the Minnesota Gun Owners Caucus is to become a Second Amendment defender. These are monthly donors of at least $5 a month or more, and that really helps us understand over time what our budget will look like, what kind of funds we'll have available for lawsuits, to pay staff, to grow the team, and to have a bigger role across Minnesota. In any way that you choose to support the caucus, I hope that you'll do so. If you can't support us financially, it is a tough economy. There's a lot of inflation and there's a lot of challenges, and I fully understand that. The most important thing you can do overall is to make sure you're getting our action alerts at gunowners.mn. You can sign up right below the main headline there, and take action when we're asking you to contact your legislators and take action to help stop gun control and push pro-gun legislation in the Minnesota House and Senate. That's it for our 2024 session recap. You can get all the details, including our copies of our written testimony, video of us testifying and our witnesses testifying at committees. You can find out exactly the position we took on every single bill and actions that happened at every single floor session and committee on our 2024 recap page, which you can find at gunowners.mn/2024. If this video doesn't answer your questions about what happened during the session, and you've taken a look at the website and you're still not sure if your question has been answered, drop us an email at contact@gunowners.mn, and I'll make sure that our team reviews that and gets back to you within a few days. With all of that, thank you again for your support, for your trust as the voice of Minnesota's gun owners here in Minnesota. Hope to see you at one of our events this summer or fall, and make sure you get out and help pro Second Amendment candidates get elected. Thanks again.